think it's time to start. Hello everyone and welcome to PhD Studios and welcome to my latest video. Today we'll be taking a look at which camera, here we go, this one right here, the XF16mm to 55mm f2.8 RLMW. Actually, maybe it's better to just show the front here. I think here you can, oh, it's upside down though. I think now you can see, there you go. The 16-55 f2.8 RLMWR Mark II. And you'll notice something there, look at that, 72mm, and it is a red badge lens. I think from my memory, this was the first red badge lens or the second. It's the 50-140 f2.8 and then the original 16-55 f2.8. Well, it was their professional line of lenses, and Fujifilm has decided now after 9 years to finally make a Mark II version of this lens, and that's awesome. I'm happy that Fujifilm is going back to older lenses. We think of the XF27 f2.8. They ended up making it an R WR, which means it has a aperture ring and it's weather sealed, although the optical design was basically the same. The old lens, to be honest, didn't really need to be revamped. Nobody was really complaining about it, other than maybe like adding OIS, but I knew they wouldn't do it because it would compromise the optical quality of that lens. And so 9 years, what a big difference. In fact, I decided here to put it next to the original. So this is the XH2, so the 40 megapixel sensor in this one here, and here is the original XH1, and this is the 16 to 80 zoom lens, and there's a lot of similarities between these two lenses, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. So this new 16 to 55 2.8 Mark II, the price, $11.99 USD. So they've kept it the same price. And oddly enough, if you go to B&H, the old version is still $11.99 USD. Although it's on sale, they're pricing it the same. And so, you know, right off the bat, if you can get this newer version and it's the same price, there's no reason to buy the older version. And maybe there's two reasons why. One of them is maybe you want 77mm filter thread size. Like maybe you already have filters and other lenses with that filter thread. Then sure. Another one is the older version is made in Japan, and maybe you want to keep some of the OG made in Japan lenses, and so those two reasons. But other than that, I think everything else is better about this newer version here. And so what are the differences? Well, this newer version is 37% lighter. So the old version was 655 grams. This new one is 410 grams. It's 11mm shorter. And as I mentioned, it's using a 72mm filter thread instead of a 77. And so if you do have the 50-140 f2.8, that is also 72. And so it just makes sense. I mean, even the original version, I guess they didn't really think about it. The two red badge or red label lenses should have just shared the same filter thread. So now it matches 72mm. So if you have, especially some of the more expensive filters, it's nice that you can share the same filters. Now the lens design has changed, and I'll insert the chart. So if you go to Fujifilm's official website, they give you the MTF charts as well as the lens breakdown. The design now is 16 elements and 11 groups, and the older one actually had one extra element. And if you look at the design, the difference is mostly in the back, but the new version, 4 spherical, 3 ED elements, and then 1 super ED element. And then the chart shows you, which of the elements has that super ED element. But with that newer design, Fujifilm's saying that it's been upgraded to be able to handle that 40 megapixel sensor, which the XH2 has, the XT5, the XT50. Am I missing any cameras? And the X106, but that is an interchangeable lens. But supposedly that this upgrade can handle the difference. Now, I could have asked Fujifilm to send me the old version and then test it directly against the new version. I'm not going to bother. The old version, actually, optically, I don't remember anyone ever complaining about it, so I'm not really going to do an A-B of the two. I say if you have the old version, just keep it, other than if that filter thread makes a huge difference for you. Optically, from the tests that I've seen, the bokeh is a little bit different, a little bit more detail if you're really punching in with the 40 megapixel sensor. Besides that, and also this does have a de-click feature here, and so if you notice here, now it's smooth. And when you click it the other way, you can hear that clicking. Now, you have to remember, this is still aperture by wire. This is not a mechanical switching. And so I actually did test it in video mode. Let's just turn this on here. and we go into video mode, and I'm going to try to see if you guys can see it here, but if you are in video mode and you declick here, can you see it opening and closing there? Now, if you can't, just so you know, there's a bit of a lag, and I'll insert a video of it when I quickly close it, and then it kind of lags a bit behind, then I open it, it lags behind a little bit, and so because it's aperture controlled by wire instead of a mechanical control, you're going to get a little bit of that lag, and maybe that's going to irritate some videographers. Now, because it is electronic, they can maybe speed it up in firmware, so I mean, I'm not a videographer, it's not a big deal for me. If you do shoot video, at least you don't hear that sound, and all you do is basically lock in the ISO, you lock in your shutter speed, then maybe when you go from outside to inside, maybe you're at f22 outside, and then you go indoors, and then you basically brighten it up, right, for indoors. Either that, or you just, like a lot of us, you just use a variable ND filter. You could do the same thing, but that does add like 2.5 stops extra. It does sort of help you in that way, but then at the same time, you're not changing your depth of field, right? You're not going from deep depth of field to shallow depth of field just when you go indoors. So there are advantages of using variable NDs, and there are also disadvantages as well. So to me, I'm neutral. I'd always keep it click. I just wish it was in half stops instead of third stops. Now, the reason why I have this lens here is because this is my 16-80, and this has been my main studio talking head lens that I've had for years, and I in fact replaced it with this lens here. This is a Sigma 18-50 f2.8, but in the end I actually ended up going back to this lens here because sometimes I did really need to punch in like this for product photography. So I love this lens. Fujifilm actually claims that these two, like in terms of size and weight, they're very similar. They're so similar, you can see this lens hood here. You see this lens hood here, right? You can swap them, look at that. You could swap the lens hoods. There you go. So now it just switched. You could put 16-80 hood on the 16-55, and you could put the 16-55 hood on the 16-80, and so that's how similar the design. But even if you look at it, I mean, look how similar in size it is, and as well as in weight. It looks like the 16-55 is a little bit longer, and they both share 72mm front filter thread, and so they're very similar in size and weight. So one thing I was thinking about is, who is this lens for? If you are looking for a bokeh monster, you're not going to get it with this lens. I actually did a test with my Leica M10R with this collapsible 50mm f2.8 versus this lens here at 35mm. So it's close. I should have went to 33mm, but you get the point. At f2.8, and I took a portrait of Camera Girl just today, and I punched in, I took a look at the sharpness. This is 40 megapixels, this is 40 megapixels, and I just wanted to take a look mostly at the depth of field. Now this lens is not well known for having amazing shallow depth of field, but even compared to this lens here, because this is a full frame sensor, you could tell in images, so I'll post the images, you could tell that with the 50 Elmar, the f2.8, the depth of field, you get more separation with this lens versus this lens here. And as you can see, even just sort of like the size and weight, this was kind of a burden to walk around with and shoot with. And then this one was just a lot more compact. Now, this is not comparing these two different brands or these two sensors, but I really was just kind of looking at 50 f2.8 full frame and then 35mm f2.8 in APS-C. And so you can see in the posted photos, it's not a bokeh monster. And so if you're really looking for shallow depth of field, I highly recommend just to get prime lenses. And this is my favorite setup here. This is my X Pro 3 with a 35 f1.4. And I'll post a photo here that I took of Camera Girl. One was I was just eating with her, and I was sitting across. And you could see how beautifully the background just melts away, and the transition from sharp to out of focus is just, the rendering is really nice with this 35mm f1.4 lens. And this is the first gen lens as well. The 33-1.4, also amazing, beautiful shallow depth of field. I'll even insert a photo that I took using the 23 f1.4, but you can see the 23-1.4, the new XF23-1.4 R LMWR. Use that lens at f1.4. You could really see how shallow the depth of field is and how beautiful it is. And in fact, even the 18mm f1.4, I'll post a photo there. Even at 18, you can see that 2-stop difference against this lens here. You get that really nice separation between the subject and the background. So if you are really looking for shallow depth of field and you want your images to pop, I highly recommend figure out what focal length that you enjoy shooting with. For myself, it will be the 18mm f1.4 or like the 28mm equivalent. That's my primary field of view. I love shooting with that lens and that focal length. And so for me, I would shoot with the 18-1.4, but if you're, I think most people are probably a 23-1.4 or 35 or 33-1.4 in Fujifilm. And so you get beautiful separation. And so this lens here is really for someone, let's say you're doing event photography, you're doing wedding photography, you need to quickly change focal lengths. You're jumping from 16, and look at the focal length, right? Well, in the primes, you have a 16-1.4, 18-1.4, 23-1.4, you have the 33-1.4, you have a 35-1.4, and you have the 56-1.2. And so all those lenses, minimum 2 stops faster. But if you're doing event photography, you're going from ultra wide to sort of like short telephoto, and you need to quickly change. It's nice to have a consistent aperture, so you're at f4 or f2.8, and you quickly, I think for event, you're probably still at f4 or 5.6 using flash or strobes, and you're quickly changing. And so if you're doing those kind of things, it's great to have a lens like this. If not, I think you're better off to have a prime lens like this. Take beautiful, shallow depth of field images. I'll maybe throw in another 35-1.4 image, but just the separation when you get with the prime, as long as it's a prime that you're really used to. So for me, as beautiful as this 16-55 f2.8 lens is, I'm still going to run around with this prime lens. Now, I thought really for those that are looking at this lens, there are different options. So one of them is the 16-80 f4. So it's a one-stop difference. The thing about the 16-80 I like is actually has OIS, so it has optical image stabilization. Well, how much do you get with this? You get 6 stops. So if you have a body like an XT3 or an XT30 or even the XM5, those bodies don't have image stabilization. Well, this lens gives you 6 stops, but it's only 1 stop slower, but you also get to go to 80mm with this lens. And so for $599, you save $500 against this lens here. So highly recommend this lens. I mean, I have this, I use this for all my studio work, I use this for my talking head work, I use this for my product photography work, and so I love using this lens. Another option is this lens here. This is the Sigma 18-50 f2.8. So obviously it's way more narrow use, but this is a compact. This is about the size of some of the Fujiluxes and the weight as well. Nice, light, and compact. And when I was taking a look at the Fujifilm XF16-55 f2.8, the Tamron 17-70 f2.8, and then this lens here, I have articles on Fujilux on all those lenses, so I'll put links down below. But in the end, I decided to get this one. Why? Because even though optically it was the weakest, and although it had the least range, it was light and compact. And on days where I wanted to go out and I wanted multiple focal lengths, but I didn't want to carry multiple primes, this is perfect because of size and weight. And that is a huge consideration for me. And so if I want a compact zoom that's f2.8, I think something like this is great. So this Sigma lens here, $599. The Tamron is a 17-70 f2.8, so it has the kind of like a nicer overall range. F2.8 constant, that's $799. So still cheaper than this lens here. Although optically, I love the sun stars on the Tamron, and I'll insert, I think one of my favorite nighttime photos is with the Tamron 17-70. Beautiful sun stars, and just optically just has a lot of really cool character. But in the end, I felt that optically the original 16-55 f2.8 from Fujifilm was better optically, and now this is an improvement over the last version. It has 11 blades in the iris opening of the aperture versus 9, so you'll get less onion rings in the bokeh. But again, I don't really care about that. So optically, this is going to be probably the best X Mount f2.8 standard zoom lens. And you won't be disappointed. And considering the older version is still technically being sold at the same price, I see if you have the old one, keep it. If you don't have it and you're upgrading from a different lens, then it's totally worth it to get this version here. It's smaller, it's lighter, it uses a smaller filter thread which matches the other red badge lens, the 50-140 f2.8. And for those that care, it has a declick feature here. And so this is the way to go. Again, for events, for weddings, For those that really need a zoom, it's weather sealed but no optical image stabilization. This is another really good option, the 16-80. This is what I have, and I wouldn't even trade for these, because just having that extra punch in works out great for me in my studio, but as well having the OIS. So if I ever put it on a camera like the X Pro 3 or any other non-IBIS equipped Fujifilm X body, this lens will give me image stabilization. So that 6 stops, totally worth it for me to have it in a lens like this. And so I'm going to do further testing. This is really just my first look and just kind of giving you different options. I still prefer primes. It's lighter, it's more compact, but you need to know your focal length. And I know my focal lengths. I know what I like to shoot with. But for you, maybe you need this lens, so this is a great upgrade. Let me know down below which of these lenses would you probably choose and why, and then I'll keep on testing this lens. And also just very quickly, this is the original XH1, as I mentioned. I just love the dials. I love having the drive. It's a lot like the XT4. In fact, the XT4 is probably designed after the XH1. Basically, the dial setup is the same, other than this has photometry in the lower section here instead of it being video or stills, and I like that upgrade on the XT4. In fact, I'm shooting this on the XT4, but I love having that top screen, so when you do turn it on, you can just do a quick check and see what's happening up here. With this thing here is a PASM dial. You're really focused on using buttons and stuff like that, and also I'm not a fan of this hidden articulating screen. I like things centered, so as a still-centric content creator, I prefer having a rear screen that kind of aligns, and it's a 3-way articulating screen, so it does articulate this way as well. So if you're shooting vertically, you can sort of shoot down low like this. So I prefer this design, but overall, I still prefer my X Pro 3. This is my favorite Fujifilm X series body. And so thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you soon, and let me just straighten this out here. There you go. All right, so thanks for watching. Let me know if you have any questions down below. We'll talk to you soon, and happy shooting.